Okay, ladies, I think it's time. It's 12:02, and I see people joining in groups and batches, so that's good. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone at the DWLA and DAYL for joining us today. This is a continuation of the Mentoring Circles panel discussions called How Do They Do It? And today's topic is something that I think we're all struggling with right now, working from home remotely during this pandemic. So I'm really excited to moderate this panel. We've got some phenomenal panelists here with us. And so today's topic is tips for taking control of your time from women who are doing it all. And after having talked to these women, they are in fact doing it all, at least as far as I can tell. This discussion is going to be loosely based on Laura Vanderkam's book called 168 Hours. And the premise of the book is that you have more time than you think. And I know that sounds daunting because it's really tools to help you fit more into your already crammed schedule. But it is a helpful book, and it does give some really practical advice on how to structure your life in a way that gives you more control over it. So what I'd like to do is have our panelists introduce themselves. Normally, I would introduce them as your moderator. My name is Haley Jones. I'm an associate at Crawford, Wishman & Lang, where I practice commercial litigation. And instead of introducing the rest of the people who you're going to meet today, our panelists, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, because I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is our personal lives and how we're structuring the boundaries between our personal lives and our professional lives. And so letting them introduce themselves feels a little more natural in this setting. So we'll start with Andrea, and I'll turn it over to you, Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Haley. Also, thank you to Alexa Swansea for asking me to join this panel. I'm honored to be on this panel with all these incredible women. So yeah, I'm a senior associate at Carrington Coleman. My practice areas are art law, business law, and intellectual property. In addition to that, I actually have a second job. I am a professor at SMU. As well. So I'm also on a few different boards as well. So time management is critical to me because I'm juggling quite a bit right now. So.
Hi, everyone. Chelsea Hilliard. I'm sure by now y'all are familiar with, you've met me through the Mentoring Circles program. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Chelsea Hilliard. I'm a senior counsel at Foley & Lardner, where I practice securities and commercial litigation. I've been involved with a lot of the bar organizations throughout the years, and have the honor and pleasure of serving as co-chair of the Mentoring Circles program this year with my wonderful partner, Bayling Ortiz. So it's exciting to be here, and I'm thrilled to speak on this particular topic, because I think right now we are all going through a challenge in one way or another. And for me, just a little bit about sort of why I think I might be able to provide some insight on this. Right now, I am currently located in California. I'm quarantining with my parents here. We had some health issues earlier in the year, and that required me to be out here. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I can't do it all by myself without my without the previous infrastructure that I had built around myself in Dallas to allow me to do all of the things I was doing. So it was sort of an awakening and a realization that things are different. And I'm hopeful that I can impart some of the lessons I've learned, the things that I'm working on, and provide some insight into how we're all dealing with this incredibly new and different situation of what it is to do it all in a pandemic. So thanks for having me.
All right, I guess I'm up. So I am Lauren Leahy, and I am the Chief Legal Officer of Pizza Hut's U.S. business, which is, I joke, I'm basically just a pizza lawyer. So that's fun. And we've got about 7,000 units around the U.S. and more than 100 franchisees. So a lot of fun in the midst of a pandemic as you think about how much people are relying on delivery and carry out services and the role that pizza plays, you know, making sure that we keep our employees and our customers safe. So it's been kind of an exciting and accelerated time to learn, and also totally insane. And then the general manager part of my job, I also am responsible for a business unit at Pizza Hut that manages, if you've ever had those kind of like small baby pizzas at Target or military base, well, you may or may not have been to a military base, but you know, an airport, all of that rolls up to me as well. So again, just been a really interesting time from a business perspective. But personally, I have a 5-year-old, a very rambunctious 5-year-old boy, and a 10-month-old girl. So I've been doing this quarantine thing, trying to be a CLO and general manager while I have, and this may happen while we're on the phone, you know, just the chaos of my world somewhere in the sometimes distant and sometimes less than distant background, and trying to figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't make, you know, my kids feel unimportant or rejected when I've got to be super focused and really manage my time for work, but also, you know, take advantage of, for example, I saw my daughter, like I heard the nanny screaming, Lauren, 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 come down here. And I was able to see my daughter take her first steps last week. So it's like, there are these tiny bright moments, you know, in this, and trying to figure out both time management and just general, frankly, survival in the midst of all this. And for some folks, literally, and that's the horror of it. And for most of us, just emotionally and kind of one foot in front of the other wise, that's what I hope we can be vulnerable and honest and talk about today. Is just, there's the general time management challenge, and now it's all harder and messier these days.
So I think I'm up next. My name is Whitney Kelch Green, and I am senior counsel at Godwin Bowman. I practice exclusively family law. In addition to that, I am the 2020 president-elect for the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers, which will make me president next year. I also sit on the SPCA of Texas Young Professionals Board, and I foster dogs and volunteer with Dallas Pets Alive. If that's not enough, I also am a dog mom to 2 rescue pups, and recently am a new human mom to a little girl who's 4 months old now. I'm really honored to sit on this panel with all of these women and talk about these issues, because as many of the panelists have already echoed, it's such an important discussion and challenge for us to have, to sit here and be vulnerable and talk about time management, not just how great we're doing it, because I think we all have struggles with it, and we've all had to adapt to the changing times in the pandemic. But I think it's important to share those vulnerabilities and let everybody know that you're not alone, and that these challenges are something that we're all going through, and that there are tips and tricks to help ease some of the stress of it. But the important thing is that we're all in it together. And so I'm really excited to have this discussion and hear from everyone else, and get the ideas, and hopefully be able to share and make a positive impact for some of y'all who are listening.
So as you can see now, we've got some awesome panelists. I want to talk briefly before I start asking them to share some insight with us about the book that was sort of the launching point of Alexis Swansea and I for this discussion. It's 168 Hours by Laura Vanderkam. It's a great book. If you haven't read any sort of self-help or leadership books ever before, this is a really approachable book. So one of the big takeaways is that we all have more time than we think if we're simply meaningfully tracking the use of our time. And as lawyers, we do that, but we don't always do it with our personal time. And it gives you in this book some tools to start prioritizing activities in your personal life that bring you joy or meaning, which are not the same, and which is a tenet of the book, and then let the rest go. There's some interesting data points in here that sort of support the proposition that women who work full-time are not missing out on the ability to do things like raise children or volunteer. And so I would really encourage you to read the book. One of the data points that stuck out for me that Laura Vanderkam talks about is the fact that mothers who are not employed at all spend only maybe 20 minutes extra a day more than women who are employed full-time interacting with their children. And to me, that was really encouraging. I'm the kind of woman who's waiting to have children until I make partner, because I just don't know how I'm going to do it all. And this book, I think, can change the way people approach that discussion. It really is good about saying, even people who work full-time, if they start by deciding what they're going to prioritize in their personal life, they can have and do it all. So I would encourage you to read it. Laura Vanderkamp does give you some practical tools about how to log your time for a week. And she says there's never going to be a typical week. You're always going to have interruptions. You're always going to have the time that you're taking off from work for random things. You're always going to have random things. So start, wherever you start reading the book, start tracking your time, do the math. I realized that I watch a lot more TV than I thought I did. I watch like 3 hours of TV a day on average, which is crazy. I could be doing a lot of other things during that time. And normally by watching TV, I'm just sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, listening to the TV. So that's 3 hours of my day that I'm going to use more meaningfully just from doing this exercise. And Alexis Swansea, I think she and I have talked about this, and she would say she's had a similar realization about some other time, some of her time she could be using differently. So I would encourage all of you to do this activity. But that's really what the book is about and how we wanted to structure this conversation. So with that, let's jump into our questions. And the first question that I have, and we'll go in alphabetical order, ladies, by your first name, is what has been your biggest struggle with time management and how have you worked through it? Do you track your personal time? And so we'll start with Andrea.
So for me, mine has been overcommitment. Sort of my life pre-COVID and post-COVID are extremely different, as that is with most people. I'm a hand raiser. I don't like to let people down when people ask for help. I always want to be there and say, yes, I'll do this. And so prior to COVID, it was quite overcommitment. Like I said, having 2 jobs, but then also, I'm part of the Dallas Bar Association's Entertainment, Sports, and Art Law section. Also sit on the board of Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, and on the board for the Cedars Union, which is an art incubator. So those commitments were just keeping me really busy, as well as networking, right? There's a big push. You want to make partners, so you've got to get out network and you've got to get business. And there's just no way of you can do that all. There's just no way. There's something has to give. And so post-COVID, I really gave me the opportunity to sort of sit back and realize what activities are more meaningful to me. And, what boards do I enjoy being part of more, and really focusing more, not necessarily on going out networking and happy hours and all of that stuff, but really giving more attention to the clients I have now. And so it's been a really good change in my life. I've been able to track personal time more. I've also been able to set boundaries more too on personal time for myself. We don't have kids. I actually got married during COVID too, which was crazy. But I think it's been helpful to our relationship too, because we were both so overcommitted in extracurricular activities, and now we can focus on things that are really meaningful to us, and you still can help and give back a lot. You don't have to be in 10 places at once to help people. And so that's kind of how that's been my biggest struggle before. And I think now, when we are starting to hopefully get back in the office here at my firm in the next few months, really take a look at reorganizing my time as well, and extracurricular activities.
So for me, this is one of those topics where I felt pre-COVID, I had come up with a great plan. I was being really mindful about, I'd read a lot about being intentional with my time, a lot of the things that Andrea was just saying. And, for me, it was a matter of every 6 months I would sit down and, I have these sort of exercises I go through where I'm thinking about, I know what my core values are. I think about, at the end of the day, when I'm looking back at my life and thinking, will I be proud of the life I've lived? And for me, what does that look like? And I've got my spheres. I've got my work sphere, my personal sphere, my family sphere. And for everyone, that'll be different, right? And so these are very personal questions, but I think that it's important to start with that framework, that understanding, that self realization, because then from there, every 6 months or quarterly, however I was doing it, but I had a 6-month date on my calendar where that was the day where I would go through and say, okay, in each of the spheres of my life, what are the things that I'm doing? Like, what activities are is that activity aligned with my core values, and what is the purpose? Why am I doing that? Why am I devoting time to this activity? And if it wasn't aligned, then you cut it. And I do track probably all of my time. I work at a big firm, and we track everything. And as frustrating and tedious as that process is, it is helpful because it's like I've already done the 168 challenge of I know where all of my time goes. And so it is helpful in that regard, because I'm very purposeful in where my time is going. Now, COVID has thrown that it was like it threw it in a blender. And I was really frustrated with myself and put a lot of blame on myself, especially in the first couple months, because I felt inadequate. I felt like I wasn't able to do the things that I was able to do before. And there's been a lot of realizations through this process, and I'm learning to give myself a little bit of a break, because I'm like, I have the same amount of hours in a day, but I don't seem to be able to do as much, and I'm trying. And there's a mental aspect, there's this fatigue aspect that is very real. We're creatures that enjoy other company. We want to be with people, and when you're not with people, it is really hard. And when you're in the same exact environment, when I'm standing here in front of this computer all day long, your brain fatigues, it gets tired, it needs a changed environment, whether that's me going into the kitchen to work on a specific type of project, or it's me getting out and exercising. I've had to learn that I have to come up with new ways to do the same things I was doing before. And I also have to recognize that I can't do as much as I was doing before. And then I do actually need to take personal time, even though I feel like I can't be as efficient. That personal time, that whether that's exercise or it's, having a conversation with a human being, whatever that is, it's like I was thinking about this morning. It's like rule number 1 when you go on an airplane: put on your mask first before helping the person next to you with theirs. And ultimately what it is you have a finite amount of energy. And what I'm hoping that we can all take away from this today is something that I mean, look, I'm not saying I have this figured out. I just am cognizant now that there's a finite amount of energy and control, self-control, and that those two are related. So if I'm being intentional about the energy I'm putting into something and the time I'm putting into something, and how I'm breaking those items up throughout the day, I might be able to accomplish about 75, 80% of what I was probably accomplishing pre-COVID. And that remaining 15, 20%, I have to accept that that's not realistic right now in this current environment, and let that go. So that's my truth right now, and I hope that's helpful for someone out there.
It's helpful for me, if that's reassuring. I mean, this stuff is really hard for all of us. I mean, my biggest struggle with time management is underlied by 2 kind of parallel problems. The first, like Andrea, I am a hand raiser, and I love to kind of be a part of something. And then I get in the middle of it and it's like, oh my gosh, my calendar is completely slammed. I'm totally overwhelmed. I still want to be a part of this. And yet finding a path to make it all happen all of a sudden becomes incredibly daunting. And so, I'm on a lot of charity boards, I'm doing pro bono cases, and I've got my work and my family, the spheres that Chelsea was talking about. And, it's more than 24 hours in the day, provided that I'm doing some healthy amount of eating and sleeping. And so there's this overcommitment problem. And then I also work in an incredibly meeting-centric culture. So I have a lot of ways that I track, like how much time I'm spending on various screens, how much time I'm spending on video. I have like widgets and apps and stuff to try and hold myself accountable. And I'm spending anywhere between 7 and 10 hours a day on video, talking to people. And so for me, that makes it really hard to actually churn out any version of work product, because if you want to be focused with somebody, then it's like you talk about the work that you need to do, but then you actually have to do the work. And that happens, after hours for the most part. So there's this meeting-centric culture that sometimes it can be more efficient and effective, and it certainly helps me not feel disconnected from people right now, but it can be really fatiguing. And it makes it hard for me to then want to like chat with a friend at night or do things that are otherwise personally important to me that involve the same methods of communication, because I'm just super over it. Like, I don't want to be on a phone. I don't want to be on a video. Like, come 8 or 9 p.m., I'm out of the communication game, so that has had a unique impact on some relationships, particularly long distance relationships, like girlfriends I've had for forever, where I just don't have that same time. And so those two parallel paths of a meeting centric culture and an overcommitment, I would say, create my biggest struggle, which is being present. So, if I know I'm in a meeting and I've got all this work that's backlogging every minute and every hour, I want to be totally focused on what this person I'm managing is saying, or what this team member is telling me we need to do. And in the back of my mind, I've got all these other things going on. Or I'm at dinner with my kids and I want so bad to just be at dinner with my kids, but it's very difficult to be present because of the overcommitment and the way that these meetings impact the day. So there's a lot I can do to fix that, hypothetically. And have, I've had some, I would say, somewhat effective mechanisms and attempts. Tracking personal time has never really worked very well for me. It's kind of, for me, like tracking calories. I do it for about 3 days and I'm like, I don't like the results of that at all. That's way too little personal time or way too many calories. Like, it's just making me stressed out. I'm out. But so I don't track my personal time, but I do have these apps that'll be like, hey, what are you doing, sis? Like, why are you still on this screen right now? And some alerts that will pop up and be like, do we really, it's during specific times of the day when I get on my screen, like during dinner time, I'll have an alert that's like, is this what you want to be doing with your life, Lauren? And that helps. But at a high level, I think the reality is any of us who claim to not struggle with time management, particularly in this critical time, are either geniuses, and I would love to sit at your feet and learn from you, or really great storytellers.
So I think that's my cue. So the problem with going last in panels like this is trying to not be redundant. And so I really echo what all the panelists have said regarding, overcommitment and trying to be the best. It is certainly one of the biggest struggles regarding time management. For me, it's prioritization, which is what the book Haley's talking about really speaks to. A lot of times I feel that everything needs to be a priority, and obviously everything can't be a priority all the time. I heard something in a speech a couple years ago about a real successful businesswoman CEO who was asked, how do you do it all? And how do you do it all successfully? And her response was, I don't. Typically when I'm succeeding and I'm doing a really kick-ass job in my professional life, it normally means that my personal life is suffering a little bit, and vice versa. When I'm doing a bang-up job as a mom, a lot of times that means, I didn't work on that one draft that maybe I could have, or maybe I didn't bill that one extra billable hour. And for me, it's been okay letting that go. And I've really risen to the challenge of figuring out how to manage my time by preparation, really simply speaking. I really look at things on a micro level, probably to a fault, and figure out what is the exact step A, B, C, and D that I can do to improve the problem that's in front of me. And so from a micro level, looking at what have been the best solutions for me, I would say first, it's living and dying by my calendar. I quite literally block out portions in my day that say draft pleadings or prep for this hearing, because otherwise I'm going to be last minute on everything I do. And that's a really stressful way for me personally to live my life. I also implement routines. Being the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers president-elect this year, I get hundreds of DAYL emails, and it would be very easy for me to get distracted in my workday and check my Gmail throughout the day for all of these emails. Instead, I literally look at my emails once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once at night. And my colleagues on the DAYL board know that if something's urgent, text me, because I'm not going to be tied to my emails all day, because I physically can't do that. Finally, on more of a micro level, one thing that I just started doing a couple weeks ago is I tell my husband, hey, you've got to watch our baby for 2 hours. I need to make a to-do list. And I look at the calendar for that whole week, and I figure out what are the to-do lists that I must get done this week. What are my non-negotiables? And I literally write them down, because crossing off each piece on that list definitely gives me power over my own schedule. And it really does exercise this motivation muscle in my brain that keeps me going, because I can see the progress I've made. As to the last question regarding tracking my personal time, I actually had never done it before until I read this book. And it was a really cathartic exercise for me, because it held me accountable, because I would look at, oh my gosh, I spent 4 chunks of 30 minutes on Facebook, and that needs to change. Why am I doing these unintentional things that don't necessarily need to be done, when I could be spending them on more intentional things like time with my family or time preparing for a hearing? And so, I really think that small steps can lead to a bigger solution. I don't think there is a solution at the end of the day. I think that we all have to realize that being more mindful of our time is certainly going to help us have more time. But at the end of the day, we can't do everything, and we can't do everything perfectly.
Whitney, it makes me feel better to hear you say that you think we can't do everything perfectly, because from where I'm sitting, you're doing it pretty close. I'm going to actually skip this question. It's what would you do with 30 extra minutes in a day? It's a great question, but I think we're running a little long, so I want to get to some of our meatier questions. And some of you have touched on this next question and your answers so far, but I think it's something that affects every young lawyer, really every person who works in a professional job at this point with where we are with technology. And it's, how do you manage constant daily interruptions posed by email and social media notifications? I feel like I'm getting pinged 18 different ways every hour of the day between text, email, and a Facebook notification that just pops up. So how do you set that aside? How do you deal with that? And what are your strategies? And I think I'm going to throw you guys a curveball and maybe start with Whitney this time, and we'll go the other way. We'll go from Whitney to Lawrence, and Chelsea to Andrea.
Okay, so now I don't have to have like the pressure of following all these other ladies' answers. So that's good. So for me, it's kind of what I said earlier. So I'll be quick about it. I set my phone aside. I close out my Gmail, and I say, this is not my Gmail time. This is not my Facebook time. I have to. In family law, I will typically work on, my practice area is a little bit different in the sense that I work on about 15 cases every single day, whether that's answering an email, talking to a client, drafting a pleading, or attending a hearing. And so for me, I physically cannot be checking my social media, my text messages, my Gmail, and keeping up with my workspace. And so that's why I use my calendar, and I calendar things. And you know what? If I want to put WKG personal time on my calendar, guess what? My secretary will schedule around that, and it's okay. And if I want to use those 30 minutes to eat a sandwich or check Facebook, then that's what I'll do. And so I really limit my interruptions by calendaring out my time. And I know that that sounds really draconian, but it helps me from an anxiety standpoint and from a productivity standpoint.
Yeah, I'll echo the live and die by my calendar piece. Like every single moment of my day is calendar blocked, even if it is something personal or whatever. And having an admin who knows you well enough, who can just block and tackle for you and say like, she knows I'm at the OBGYN, but as far as everybody else is concerned, I'm at a CLE, like whatever it needs to be to give me some space. Like there's some just reality to having somebody who can block and tackle for you in that way. And I have a calendar that is like, every second of the day. And it really does make my life a lot easier and allow me to focus on that piece as opposed to kind of getting totally distracted by email and social media. I do not get social media notifications. I turned them off. There is not one productive or urgent thing that is happening on social media that cannot wait for me. That may not be true if you're in family law and there's somebody who communicates with you that way, or in other pieces of the law. But for me, like it's a hard no. And then as far as email is concerned, I can't really ever set my phone totally to the side, but I don't get like the pinging notifications. I check probably a lot more often than I should, but I'm in control of that, as opposed to even on my computer screen, like I've turned off the notifications. People know if they need me really badly, like you said, when they text me. And that's something I probably pay the greatest attention to, because if it's a true emergency, I'll get it on my watch. And that's how I really know, okay, like it's go time. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Completely agree with everything, and especially on the notifications. I have all of the pop-ups, all of that is off. What I would say, this is something that has changed. This is, again, I'm evolving, I'm adapting right now. I read an article a while back from a tech CEO who said that to be really productive, his employees needed different modes of communication for different types of communication. And so I've been working on implementing that with my teams, using Teams, Lauren, as we were chatting about earlier. And so I have found that by using like the IM or the chat functionality in Teams and linking notebooks via OneNote on there, I see that as because we're all virtual, I've struggled right now, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's super helpful for any of the litigators out there who are not in the same office. It's hard to collaborate. It's hard to have that same kind of dialogue and communication, and everything just seems kind of broken up and linear in a way that isn't necessarily conducive to trial practice. So right now I'm trying to use and learn about all of these different features out there. Like on Teams, I can have OneNote notebooks and we can all be in a document at the same time and provide comments and feedback. And if you want me to look at something specific in there, you can type @Chelsea Hilliard and then it'll pop up and notify me. And then I go right to the meat of what the question or issue is, instead of sending me an email that's in my email box with 200 emails that I've received in one day, because that's the reality of email. And, you know, unsubscribe, like I unsubscribe all the time. In fact, I have an app on my phone called Unroll. I think it's called Unroll Me. That was like one of the greatest things I found in 2019. Love that thing. And so then it kind of condenses all of my personal emails into like the ones that I kept in a little nice little summary, and I get it every morning and I can check it in about 5 minutes and I'm done. And so in that way, I have very much compartmentalized personal versus work email. And in terms of like work communications, I try and keep those separate from client communications or court communications opposing counsel. I also try and like social media time is fun time, right? It's playtime. And I will be really vulnerable here and say that I've actually taken a self-imposed break from a lot of social media because I noticed that it wasn't helping my mental health. And it's frustrating when you feel like you're stuck in the same place and you see people posting about their trips, or they're hugging someone and you're like, I can't hug someone right now. And so for me personally, going through some difficulties about not being in the same place when my dad was sick, and then, you know, now that I'm here with them, it's just, there's a lot of emotions that I feel like it's personal. It's one of those things you have to make that decision of like, is this good for me? Is this healthy? And evaluate, reevaluate. So sorry to go on for a little bit longer, but those are my tips and tricks for right now.
So for me, I have to stay away from social media. I'm actually ADD, so those pinging and all those things are just huge problems for me if I'm trying to be productive. Those distractions can really, really negatively affect my productivity in my day. So I try to stay away from it as much as possible and sort of allow myself to look at those things later on in the day. I have to engage in social media as part of my teaching job because the students are on there and they want to, I use, you know, articles and things like that to help with the course. So I have to be engaged in social media more so. Other things that I've sort of helped is organizing my inbox. I cannot stand the clutter of having all of these emails in my inbox. I have to have a place where it goes. It's sort of like checking off something off the to-do list and have different folders of things that I know can wait versus things that need to happen now. That's really just deleting an email from my inbox is just makes things so much less stressful. That really helps keep me organized and what I need to do as well and prioritize that day. But also the app, the to-do list app for Microsoft, that's the best way. If I think I need to do something, I can immediately pull up my phone and just send a quick note and instantly have that. And that's the way I can constantly keep up my to-do list. Like I said, because sometimes, you know, I'm working on something and I see something shiny. So I know that I have to keep myself accountable. And if I put it on the to-do list, I'll make sure I'll get it done. But there's no, you know, I definitely need improvement on things. That Unroll app, definitely going to get that. Thanks for telling me, Chelsea. But I do need to work on things a lot more, especially with the interruptions with social media too. But those are some things that have really helped me stay organized and on track.
Here's our next question, and we'll start with Andrea on this one and go back the other way. And the reason why I posed this question is one of the themes of Laura Vanderkam's book is your core competency. It's know what your core competency is and let the rest of the things that take up space in your life that don't bring you joy go. So the question is, how do you decide what to outsource? And Andrea, we'll start with you.
Yes, I learned this the hard way. 2 firms ago, I was actually in a management position. I managed 8 younger associates, and I was young myself, early 30s doing this. And I would have nightmares, and my nightmares consisted of people lined up in front of my door asking me questions of what to do. That's like, you know, it was just so much to handle. And I realized that I have to start delegating. I can't be everyone's answer. I can't solve all the problems. I'll do my best to be there and listen and help and listen to anyone that needs to vent or whatnot, but I've got to outsource. I think a lot of people are afraid to outsource because they think they lose control of it. But when you outsource, you just free up more time for other things that you really need to do. So I have no problem with outsourcing now. I know that if this is something that I don't have experience in, I will take the time to find someone that does. If I'm slammed at work, I have no problem with sending out firm-wide emails asking for help. People want to help. You know, that's why we all work together at a firm, right? So I also outsource other things in my personal life, you know, groceries, you know, other things, dinner. I mean, we're pretty bad at ordering in like Favor and all those other delivery services, but you know, that's easy for us. If we don't have to stress out about making dinner, that's so much better. So yeah, I think, you know, delegation is key. It gives me, I've found that when I delegate, I actually end up getting more clients in because I'm more available. So, yeah.
So for me, I tie it back to, why am I doing this? Is this something that aligns with my values, with the purpose of that particular sphere? And so one of the reasons, as I was mentioning in my introduction, that I've stayed here with my parents is not only to support them, but also they're supporting me. I had forgotten, or maybe it just hadn't dawned on me, I had slowly outsourced essentially like all of the household kind of taking care of Chelsea tasks, whether that was, having someone clean the house, someone, bring my groceries in, basically do everything so that I could do the things that were really really important to me. Things that I'm like, I've got to, make the time so that I can work on this project, so that I can work on this initiative because it's really meaningful to me. And you know what, making dinner isn't meaningful to me in that same way. And again, this is a very personal thing, and it will be different for everyone. But right now in COVID, it was like, wait a minute, I have lost a lot of this support. It was like, how am I not able to do as much work in the same amount of time? And yes, there was the one aspect of, okay, there is mental fatigue, there is the mental health aspect, but there's also I basically lost a support group. So being here where there's 3 of us, and I'll say it, my mom makes me dinner now. I love her for it. I appreciate her for it. It's amazing. It helps me basically get another hour in my day to do work that I need to do. The thing I will say about outsourcing or delegating in terms of the work environment, something that's really important to me is mentoring. It's one of those things that I am very purposeful and very intentional about. I don't want to just provide a project to an associate. I don't want to just hand it off. I recognize that it takes additional time. And so I have to build that additional time in to the delegation. And so I try and do that ahead of time. I try and make sure that I am, to Whitney's point, I mean, every night I'm to-do listing it, like every night. And Sunday nights, there's like a 3-hour planning session that I have with myself. But it's so rewarding. It's so great because when you're basically empowering a younger attorney to do the work and to do it the way that it needs to be done, so that they have the confidence and they feel supported in taking on that new project, especially if it's a project they've never done before. So, you definitely need to be intentional and think about that aspect, but it's important and it's rewarding. So.
Yeah. So of all the things I struggle with, and I can list them alphabetically or by category, outsourcing is not one of them. It is something that has become just like fundamentally important to my everyday existence. Chelsea, you build an infrastructure around yourself to kind of support the things that bring you joy or that bring you money. So you kind of have to do just make it all work. For me, it comes down to the overlap in the Venn diagram between my own core competencies and the things that bring me joy and the people that I trust. And where that overlap kind of situates itself, where it's something that's not within my core competency necessarily, or it doesn't bring me joy, and there's someone that I really trust, it's like, what could possibly be more perfect? And so I think part of outsourcing is surrounding yourself with a lot of people that you trust and like really developing those relationships, because it makes it so much easier. If you love someone and you trust them, they may not do it exactly the way you did. It may not be, structured in your version of perfect. And it also just doesn't matter for the most part, because if you trust them, they may very well be better and right. And sometimes standing down is the greatest lesson as a manager, as a leader, as a mentor, to really respect the scope and autonomy of people who have given you the privilege of working for you. And in my case, I have been very intentional about my legal team. Like every single one of them, I would happily report to, every single one. And when I think about I just don't need to micromanage them at all. And if I'm completely stressed out, I can say, hey, I need you to handle this. And it's done. Like, I don't need to think about it another time. That's a privilege. And if you're a young lawyer, you're not going to have that. So some of it is recognizing it gets better as your team expands and you have more and more trusted people you can delegate to. It does get easier. There's this like period in your first few years where you're like, oh, that's a nice story, Lauren, except I don't have that power right now. You will, and it gets better. And then there's just the stuff in your personal life where you should have enough trust that you know that somebody's going to keep your home safe or, you know, whatever. But ultimately it just comes down to, this is not my core competency and or doesn't bring me joy, and I'm going to outsource it. So for me, lots of things get dry cleaned that do not need to be dry cleaned. I have a nanny who watches my kids beautifully. I trust her tremendously. And she does a lot of things with my kids that aren't exactly what I would do. And that's fine, because it is kind of what it is. And so I think it's true at work. I think it's true in your personal life. And I think the more you invest in those relationships and actually spend the time on that, the easier all of it gets. And for me in personal stuff too, I mean, with my nanny, we've had to become co-parents, frankly, because I don't have the hours in the day with my kids that she does.
So I really echo what Lauren said as far as figuring out what sparks joy. I guess you could say that Laura Vanderkam is the Marie Kondo of time management before Marie Kondo existed. And I really enjoyed reading the book and figuring out for myself, okay, well, do I really like walking the dogs, for example? In my personal life, that's something that's very easy to outsource, but I have discovered that I really like doing it. I really like taking my little girl and walking my dogs, and then that provides two things for me as a leisure activity. I get to spend time with my child and I get to spend time walking the dogs. And guess what? I also get a little bit of exercise, which is important, but I wish I could outsource to have somebody ride my Peloton for me and essentially help me lose some weight while doing it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And so really for outsourcing my personal time, I try to look at what do I like versus what do I not like. I don't like cooking, generally speaking. And so like Andrea, I am certainly guilty of probably ordering out a lot, or, you know, my husband's really good at cooking. And so he's been doing a lot of that while maybe I'm doing the diaper changing or caring for the dogs or something. We try to have that give and take and just a team built system. I also hate grocery shopping. And so this pandemic has really created a host of wonderful services for pickup and delivery. And so that saves me a lot of time. Same thing, if I can afford it in my personal life, like a housekeeper or a nanny or a yard guy, then I do really try to implement that so I can spend my time doing more intentional, fulfilling things. As far as my work life goes, like Chelsea, I love mentoring young attorneys, especially in my practice area. I really enjoy teaching them about family law and showing them that, okay, family law doesn't have to be really combative. It doesn't have to be really litigious. It can be thought out, it can be collaborative, and you can be creative with it. And so I love working with young attorneys, providing examples. And when I build in that time to help train and mentor a young attorney, I find the joy in that they give me back just as much time as maybe I've put into them. And so it really is a positive cycle in my experience, that mentorship relationship. And I found that I can outsource and delegate to those people that I create and build those trusting relationships with.
Okay, here's our last question because we've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll have to get through it quickly. But I think this is an important one and it's a really good way to end. And the question is, thinking back to when you were in your first few years of practice, what was one thing you wished you knew about time management? And let's start with Whitney again.
So I think the number one thing I wish I had known was to really minimize distractions, and that even if you're stressed and even if you're not liking what you're doing at that particular moment, drafting that motion for summary judgment, researching this expert issue, getting on Facebook or responding to a non-urgent text message is not going to make that activity any better. Just finish it. I find that particularly when I finish something that I don't necessarily like doing at work, that it motivates me to start finishing other things on my to-do list. So I can get to the things that I enjoy doing at work. Sometimes you just have to power through. And if you do need a break, I think that it's much more important to spend your time doing something intentional, like walking across the street to get a cup of coffee, or picking up the phone, calling your mom, your dad, your best friend, instead of just getting on and mindlessly surfing Facebook. We're all guilty of it. I certainly am. But I do find that I am much more motivated and much more energized if I do something intentional as opposed to something passive.
So for me, the best advice I ever got from a mentor who was truly life-changing in my world, like there is probably not a single aspect of my professional life that this beautiful woman did not pave the way for me in. And one of the things she told me was, you're going to be juggling a lot of balls. You're a hand raiser, like you always are taking more stuff on, and you're constantly going to be juggling. And what you have to realize as early as you possibly can is which ones are rubber and are going to bounce back up, and which ones are glass and are going to shatter on the floor if you drop them. And I think it gets back to prioritization, but that's what I wish I had more confidence to lean into and understand as a young lawyer, because I think I thought everything was glass. Like just everything is precious and tender, and it's all going to shatter around me, and that imposter syndrome comes in, and you think I'm going to be this huge failure if anybody figures out that I've dropped the ball on literally anything. And now I'm like, that one's rubber. We're going to be fine. And I think it's been really transformative for my ability to be a good mom and a good wife, and I hope a good enough person to spend some time with who's not just like constantly wound up in that way. So figure out what you can drop and do it.
I'll build on what Lauren just said. This is something that I tell myself constantly still. Anytime there's something new or challenging where I'm like, oh, that's something I've only done once before, or it seems a little overwhelming sometimes when it's something you may not be comfortable doing because it's outside of your, I've taken a class on this, or I've learned how to do this, or I've been told how to do this, or when there's no framework, right? I think some of us, at least me, I'm a bit of a control freak, right? Like, so I like to have that structure, that reference guide. I want that primer on how to write this email, but it doesn't exist. And so there's an aspect of the secret to getting ahead is just getting started. And to Lauren's point, done is better than perfect. And you will fail. You have to accept that. You have to accept that you will fail. That's a very Brené Brown statement, but it's so true. You got to get started. You got to be willing to accept that you're going to fail, and you got to know and in that process, you will learn what is rubber and what's glass. I don't think that you'll know that right away, but you learn that. And the only other point on time management is to develop good habits from the outset. Be intentional about it. Learn how to track your time, because you don't want to be a 5th or 6th year lawyer or however many years you're into practice and struggle with that. It's just a hard skill, and it's a habit. So work at it now.
So I guess the biggest thing that I wish I had known in my first years is actually from my mom. My mom always talks about setting boundaries, and saying no is okay. It's okay if you don't have time to do that and say, I don't. It's also okay to not answer an email. If you've got a demanding client that's emailing you at 1 a.m., don't answer and set up a boundary. I intentionally rarely work on Saturdays. And, you know, what are we going to do on Saturday? Right. Like, I can, you know, so I can get to it. You know, I usually start looking on Sunday at my week ahead and start preparing to come in and what emails and things I need to answer, what my week's going to look like. But, you know, Saturday's me, and I'm not going to, you know, unless it's an absolute emergency, I'm not going to jump on something. But, you know, setting boundaries too with your coworkers as well of, you know, when you're available to work and when you're not. I know early on that can seem very scary to do because you're a young associate and you feel like, well, I have to be available all the time. But if you start that way, you're going to be expected to be that way your entire career. And that could be really problematic down the road. And I think there is a way that you can be an associate, you know, and put in all the time and be available for your bosses, but still set reasonable boundaries for yourself. So for me, it was about learning how to better say no. And it's okay. Like, you're not going to, you know, if you say, I'm sorry, I can't go to this event, or I'm sorry, I can't work on this project, you know, that's okay. No one's, you know, you may feel upset at yourself because you can't be available, but the other person probably doesn't care. They're like, oh, well, they're just busy, right? That's understandable. So setting boundaries. So.
That's great. I echo all of that. I think setting boundaries and trying to be meaningful with your time are so important. And those are some of the themes in this book. I would encourage all of you to read it. There are probably things you've thought about before, but there are things in there that you maybe haven't thought about that can help you give structure to your life, especially right now while we're all at home struggling with COVID. They can help you take meaningful control over how you're tracking your time and whether you are spending time on the things that bring you the most joy right now, which is hard for all of us. So I would encourage everyone to read it. I want to thank all of our panelists. This has been a great conversation. It's been cathartic for me personally to listen to you all, who I view to be so accomplished, talk about how you struggle with the same things on a daily basis that I do. So thank you so much on behalf of the DAYL and the DWLA for participating. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today for this great discussion. I think it's going to be recorded. So if there's anything you want to go back and check out a second time, you can check us out a second time. Get excited.